Hey Jay, I'm here to get a little combative, if that's all right.
Well, might as well.
All right. So I've heard you say that Christianity is not a religion that's proven by miracles or miraculous works. Is that an accurate description of your position?
Yeah, I think miracles can attest to it, but they can't be a strict proof because, I mean, every group, every sect will claim miracles, right? So miracles themselves can't be, quote, proof, but they can be evidences or they can attest to the religion being true, sure.
Okay. Do you think that was always the case, or is this in a post, um, maybe in the church era, this is the case, or would you say this has always kind of been the case for God's people to not, prove the trueness of their religion through miracles?
Well, because of the fact that at any point anybody could claim a miracle, yes, I would say that that's always true, that the definitive proof is not going to be a miracle, but would have to be some other kind of argumentation like a worldview or, something else beyond just a miracle.
Okay.
Let me give an example of that. Like we say, well, let's say for the sake of argument that somebody put together a really solid scientific paper somehow that maybe proved the Shroud of Turin, or they proved that the tomb in Jerusalem had to be the tomb where Jesus was, and it's empty. Okay, so let's say there was like some really solid proof of the resurrection, or the tomb being empty, or the shroud, or something like that, right? Like that itself, that how would that prove the total? It wouldn't prove the Christian religion, because the resurrection of Jesus only makes sense with the rest of the theology, right? Because somebody could say, okay, well maybe he just maybe crazy stuff happens. Maybe he passed out. Maybe there's a lot of other things that could be brought in. So one miracle like that doesn't necessarily mean the rest of the religion is true, right? I mean, a Muslim might say, okay, well, if that was the case, you have other holy men who were resurrected. Okay, so what? So, the Bible talks about the bones of Elisha bringing somebody back from the dead.
Right. I guess the reason I'm asking this question is, like we see in Matthew 11 when, John the Baptist sends his disciples to Jesus, and they're asking, basically for proof that he is who he says he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything Jesus tells them is, tell him what you've seen.
Yeah, the
He
works.
kind of goes down the list of his miracles.
Yeah, the works. But you notice that Jesus also says that a wicked and adulterous generation seeks a sign, and no sign will be given to it but that of Jonah. And he says that if remember the story of the guy who died. If you remember the story of the guy who dies, he says, "Hey, he's in torments, and he says, let me go back and warn my brothers. If one rises from the dead, they will believe." And Jesus doesn't say, yes, if they just saw a miracle of a resurrection and coming back from the dead, they would believe. No, Jesus says, they have Abraham and the prophets, and if they don't listen to Abraham and the prophets, they will not believe, though one rise from the dead. So no, I don't think Jesus is actually teaching that any kind of miracle will somehow prove the faith. The miracles attest to it. That's why he says that if you believe, he actually gives two options. He says, believe what I taught and you can see the scriptures, and otherwise believe on the basis of the miracles. So it's fine to believe on the basis of the miracles, but they don't prove it.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking at what, when he tells, go back and report to John what you hear and see. And I was also just thinking, back for Moses, for example, he used miracles to prove that he, was legit, whereas the magicians, to your point, could do some form of miracles, but they kind of were proven to be lesser than what Moses did.
Yeah, again, I think that in certain cases, you're right. You could have situations where God demonstrates his power being above those of that challenge him. But what I'm saying is, how do I know as an individual who isn't there for any of this stuff? I just hear this stuff. Like, I can't confirm it. And, I've got a book over on my Muslim shelf of all these stories of Islamic miracles, and you see that's supposed to vindicate and prove Islam for me, right? So you see what I'm saying is like, if I'm not physically present for these events, then how are these events going to be the final arbiter of proof, right? So sometimes too, you could have people talking about, so evidences can be called proofs in a limited sense and not in like a strictly philosophical sense, right? So miracles, I think, can attest to the faith. They can be evidences for it, but they're not proofs in a strict philosophical sense of proof.
Okay.
Because you got to have some way. You got to have some way to judge between every different religious group claiming miracles.
Right, and I guess these were miracles that the people in these different passages were seeing firsthand.
Exactly. And also remember, Deuteronomy 13 and Deuteronomy 18 explicitly say that you have a duty not just to believe the signs and the wonders, but to test the theology. So the primary way by which we judge it is on the basis of the divine revelation that comes before. Because Deuteronomy 13 and Deuteronomy 18 say that when you see a prophet or a person claiming to be a prophet and their miracles, their signs and wonders come true, don't believe it if they tell you to do some other kind of religious practice or theology, you see. So the divine revelation is the primary judge, not the other way around.
Okay. I had a second, I guess it's somewhat related point.
Okay.
You'll read in different, church fathers in different places to not trust dreams, not to believe dreams, prelest, and these type of things. But then there's also a lot of stories just through church history. I mean, like St. Nicholas, for example, where really important, powerful events are communicated through dreams. Even like with, St. John Chrysostom and I think St. Cyril, so it seems like there's some writings where it says don't trust dreams at all.
Right.
And then there's other places where, right after a guy punches someone in the face through a dream, they're told that that's, okay. And I know that maybe it's like the level of the holiness of the person receiving the dream or something like that. But is there any?
Yeah, this is the role of a spirit. This is the role of a spiritual father. So the role of the spiritual father is precisely to help through these kinds of experiences, so that we don't fall into prelust. Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess
In other words, if I thought I was having, I'm not saying this because I don't think I have any prophetic powers or dreams, but let's say that I did have a dream that I thought was prophetic, or I thought God was speaking to me, right? Like what I would, the proper process would be, I would talk to my spiritual father about it and get his wisdom and insight. And there would be probably kind of tests, and, people would bounce it off of other people. It wouldn't be this thing where it's like, you just run with it. There would be cautious processes and steps by which we would want to make sure that it's not some kind of delusion, right? And so, if it's I saw a dream where something's going to happen, and okay, well, did it come to pass? Okay, yes, then okay, maybe it was, and then we would still, it would be under the guidance of a spiritual father, right? So, that's the process that we have, and that's why that's to guard against the kind of stuff that we see in the Roman Catholic Church, like in the with these crazy women saints that are, talking to flying hosts and flying around the room and carving things in their chest, right? That's not what we do, right? We would say that's all prelust. So, but it doesn't mean that there's not miracles, clairvoyance, and spiritual gifts and all that, but that's done in the context of guidance.
Okay, because, that makes sense. I'm thinking about a lot of the prophets from the Old Testament who obviously were in the minority, and maybe the people who would maybe in the Old Covenant be looked at as spiritual elders or guides were typically the people that were, maybe compromised or whatever, that were tending to prophesy like things that people wanted to hear. So, in a case like Amos or some of these other guys, they might not have been able to, he didn't have really any credentials to begin with. And, well,
it's not a matter of credentials. It's a matter of being in the presence of holy men and elders and saints, right? So it's not about academics per se. And that's why I think we would say that, the role of the elder is kind of like the role of Elijah in the schools of the prophets. So Orthodoxy still has even that office beyond just, okay, yeah, there's the hierarchy of the priest and the bishop, but a lot of times the, secular, we could say, clergy have been compromised. And so that's that role of the sage, the elder, that calls people back to repentance, even perhaps the clergy, right? And an elder can function in that kind of Elijah style of role.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was imagining, is if you had just an Amos type of figure, just some random shepherd, or just some simple person who was told something and he goes to his.
Well, we don't know that Amos didn't have. Yeah, we don't know that Amos didn't have any other holy men, right? I mean, maybe there were, like you said, compromised, Levites and whatnot, but he could have still had other, holy men that he interacted with. A lot of the minor prophets, we only have a little bit of what they said, and we don't really know much about their life.
Okay, yeah, I guess it's just what I'm trying to understand, maybe the balance between like these obvious periods where you have, even today, like large portions of the church that are, watered down or liberalized or, whatever it is. And it's not a new problem. Like you see it through the Old and Testament and all through the ages.
Right.
And sort of knowing the balance between, just letting a bunch of soft liberal, priests tamp down people who are, they'll put whatever label on them versus, that actually being the case, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. Good points. I thought you were going to be combative. You had great points.
Why?
Sorry, I already